Michael Jackson's public image was built on spectacle, the glove, the moonwalk, the stadium crowds, and the videos that changed pop music. But behind that global fame was a private life that remained difficult for the public to understand. His personal relationships were discussed, questioned, defended, and sensationalized for decades. Some were confirmed marriages. Some were friendships interpreted through the lens of celebrity gossip. Others were private bonds that became public only because Jackson was one of the most watched people on earth. To understand this side of his life, it helps to separate documented facts from rumors, and to remember that fame shaped almost every relationship he had. Michael Jackson did not grow up with ordinary privacy, ordinary dating, or an ordinary family life. His relationships developed under conditions most people never experience: childhood stardom, constant travel, media pressure, legal controversy, and an intense desire to build the kind of family life he often said he missed. Jackson's understanding of adult relationships began unusually early. As a child member of the Jackson 5, he performed in environments that were not designed for children. The group appeared at venues that included strip clubs, sharing bills with adult entertainers, including female strippers and drag performers. At the same time, accounts of his brother's sexual experiences with groupies became part of the world around him while he was still very young. This did not mean Jackson himself lived an adult life as a child, but it did mean he was exposed to adult behavior before he had the maturity to process it. That early exposure is often discussed because it contrasts sharply with the innocence he later projected. Jackson frequently spoke about losing a normal childhood to rehearsals, touring, and performance. His later discomfort with conventional adulthood, romance, and public expectations can be viewed in part through that early environment, a childhood spent entertaining adults while being denied many ordinary childhood experiences. As Jackson became a teenager in the 1970s, the media became interested in whether the young star was dating. One name often linked to him was actress Tatum O'Neal. Reports described her as his first girlfriend, and Jackson himself later spoke about youthful feelings connected to her. But O'Neal later said their relationship was strictly platonic. That distinction matters, because many of Jackson's early relationships were difficult to categorize from the outside. The public often wanted clear labels: girlfriend, romance, couple. But some people who knew him described relationships that were affectionate, emotionally meaningful, and sometimes intense, without necessarily being conventional romances. In later years, singer and actress Stephanie Mills also identified herself as Jackson's first girlfriend, saying their relationship began after they met during the production period of The Wiz. These accounts show how Jackson's early romantic history remains partly shaped by memory, media retelling, and the blurred line between youthful affection and formal dating. Another famous name closely associated with Jackson was Brooke Shields. In the 1980s, Jackson and Shields were often seen together, and the public speculated about whether they were romantically involved. Shields later described the relationship as one of mutual admiration, friendship, and emotional closeness. She said they understood each other in ways other people might not have, partly because both had grown up in the entertainment industry and were famous at a young age. However, she also said Jackson became more distant and, in her view, more asexual over time. Their connection reveals an important pattern in Jackson's life. He often seemed drawn to people who understood the pressures of fame, especially those who had experienced public attention from childhood. But emotional closeness did not always translate into traditional romance. In the celebrity press, ambiguity became a story of its own. And Jackson's guarded personality left room for endless interpretation. Lisa Marie Presley entered Jackson's life long before their marriage. She was first introduced to him in the 1970s through Myrna Smith, a backup singer for her father, Elvis Presley. At the time, they were both connected to legendary entertainment families. She was the daughter of the king of rock and roll, and he was becoming one of the defining pop performers of his generation. They reconnected years later, in November 1992, during a difficult and transformative period in Jackson's life. By 1993, their relationship had deepened. Presley supported Jackson when he became dependent on pain medication, and she helped convince him to enter rehabilitation. This part of their relationship is important because it shows the bond was not only about publicity or celebrity symbolism. Presley was present during a vulnerable moment, and Jackson leaned on her at a time when his health, career, and public image were under enormous strain. Jackson proposed to Lisa Marie Presley over the telephone, and she accepted. On May 26, 1994, they married in a private ceremony in the Dominican Republic. The marriage immediately became a global media event, partly because of who they were: Michael Jackson, the most famous pop star in the world, and Lisa Marie Presley, the only child of Elvis. To supporters, the marriage was a real relationship between two people uniquely burdened by fame. To skeptics, it seemed sudden and strategic, especially because it happened during a period of intense scrutiny for Jackson. Their public appearances together were analyzed frame by frame. Every gesture became evidence for one theory or another. But private married life was reportedly difficult. They came from different emotional worlds, faced constant outside pressure, and struggled with expectations around family and control. The marriage ended in divorce in August 1996, a little over 2 years after the wedding. The end of the Presley marriage did not mean the emotional connection ended immediately. Presley and Jackson continued to date on and off for several years after their divorce. This complicated aftermath challenges the simple idea that their marriage can be reduced to either pure romance or pure publicity. Like many relationships, it appears to have contained attachment, conflict, loyalty, frustration, and unresolved feelings all at once. Presley later gave interviews describing the relationship as emotionally intense and difficult to explain. Jackson, for his part, remained a person whose private emotions were often filtered through public suspicion. Their marriage also became part of a larger debate about Jackson's identity and adulthood. Because he was seen as eccentric and childlike by many observers, his romantic relationships were often examined more aggressively than those of other celebrities. Instead of being allowed to be complicated, they were treated as puzzles the public felt entitled to solve. During the period around his marriage to Presley, Jackson also maintained a close friendship with Debbie Rowe. Rowe worked as an assistant to his dermatologist, who had treated Jackson's vitiligo, the skin condition that changed his appearance over time. She had known him since the mid-1980s, which meant their relationship developed over years rather than through sudden celebrity matchmaking. While Jackson was separated from Presley but still legally married, Rowe became pregnant, but she suffered a miscarriage in March 1996. This loss was personally significant, especially because Jackson deeply wanted children. After his divorce from Presley was finalized, Jackson married the pregnant Rowe on November 15, 1996, in Sydney, Australia. Their marriage was unusual in the eyes of the public, and many questioned its emotional foundation. But at its center was one of Jackson's strongest and most consistent desires: to become a father and create a family of his own. Jackson and Rowe had 2 children together. Their son, Michael Joseph Jackson Jr., commonly known as Prince, was born on February 13, 1997. Their daughter, Paris Michael Catherine Jackson, was born on April 3, 1998. Fatherhood became one of the defining parts of Jackson's later life. He often spoke about his children with tenderness, and people close to him described his devotion to them. Yet even his parenting was subject to public scrutiny. Because Jackson was already surrounded by controversy and fascination, every decision he made as a father was examined. His children were often shielded from cameras with veils or masks, a choice that drew criticism but was also explained as an attempt to protect their identities in public. In April 2000, Jackson and Rowe divorced. Rowe gave full custody rights of the children to Jackson, reinforcing the fact that he would be their primary parent going forward. Jackson's third child, Prince Michael Jackson II, was born on February 21, 2002, through an unnamed surrogate mother. The child later became widely known by the nickname Blanket, and later as BG. The secrecy surrounding his mother's identity added another layer to public curiosity about Jackson's family life. For Jackson, however, the priority appeared to be the children themselves rather than public explanation. He wanted a household centered around fatherhood, imagination, and protection from the entertainment machine that had shaped his own youth. Still, privacy was nearly impossible. His children were heirs not only to his wealth and fame, but also to the myths and debates surrounding him. In July 2009, after Jackson's death, it was revealed that his will named Diana Ross as the next-in-line guardian for his children after his mother, Katherine Jackson. That detail reflected both his trust in family and his lifelong ties to major figures in music. Some of Jackson's most discussed relationships were not marriages at all, but friendships that carried emotional weight. One example was Elizabeth Taylor, a longtime friend who understood the strange loneliness of extreme fame. In taped conversations later released by Rabbi Shmuley Bodich in the book The Michael Jackson Tapes, Jackson discussed personal relationships and even reflected on Taylor. When asked whether he felt jealous when she dated other men, he gave a layered answer, saying yes and no. He suggested that if they ever became romantic, the press would mock them and turn it into a circus. That response is revealing. Jackson seemed aware that even private feelings could become public spectacle. Media outlets also speculated over the years about other possible relationships, including with model and performer Tatiana Thumbson. But speculation should be treated carefully. In Jackson's life, proximity was often mistaken for romance, and friendship was often turned into headline material. No discussion of Michael Jackson's personal relationships can ignore the legal allegations that deeply affected his public image. In 1993, he was accused of sexually abusing the child of a family friend. A civil lawsuit was settled out of court, and Jackson was not indicted. In 2005, he faced a criminal trial involving further child sexual abuse allegations and other charges, and he was acquitted. These events shaped how many people interpreted his relationships, especially his closeness with children and families. They also intensified the divide between those who saw him as misunderstood and those who remained deeply suspicious. For an explainer, the key is to state the record accurately without turning allegation into conviction or acquittal into universal closure. Jackson's personal life remains one of the most debated in modern celebrity history because it combines documented relationships, private longing, public performance, legal controversy, and the impossible pressure of being watched from childhood until death. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.